Okay, I know this sounds like a boring video topic, but I'm also going to be spending a lot of time going over how nouns and verbs are formed and function in Proto-Indo-European and Germanic, and that's a highly requested topic. Okay, I got my retention up. Now let's do the intro. So people seemed amused by the thumbnails I made for the some English videos, which I just kind of threw together in no time. But now here I am making a whole video out of it. Brainrot terms tend to be I-dialect spellings of clippings of already slang terms. But what if they were just like that in English, and that was normal? So we'll start with Skibidi. That was the first to catch my attention because idi is a common verb ending in Proto-Germanic for a third-person singular. As I've referenced multiple times, the verb itself would be skiwana, with the inflection he, she, it, Skibidi. Now, how do we get skiwana, and what does it mean? This is the question of the hour, and this is really two questions. How do we get ski, and how do we get ama? The most obvious answer is scape becomes long skib, and eti becomes ama. Now, you may be asking, how does T become N? Well, first, a short tangent about lemmas and dictionary forms. So the infinitive of a verb, the form used with modals like need, is often considered the lemma, even though it's not that way in Latin, English, or Proto-Indo-European. Now, Latin we could argue about, sure, but if we take lemma to mean dictionary form, the dictionary I use lists Latin verbs by the first person singular. The same is true of English, though they're mostly the same. The infinitive would be to do or to have, not just do and have. Proto-Indo-European uses the third-person singular eti endings as the dictionary entry for verbs, and doesn't really have a single infinitive. The infinitive forms used in each modern language was pretty much made up exclusively for each family. So back here, this chain treheti into threana, into throw, is true in spirit, but not by technicality. These are all lemmas, and out of these, only Proto-Germanic uses the infinitive as the lemma. Treheti actually gives treidi, which gives throweth, which gives throweth, or just throws. Just throw is from thrawa, from threo, from treho. And treana is from trehonom, and in English it gives thrown, which isn't a real word anymore. Not to be confused with thrown, the strong past participle, from Proto-Germanic threanar, from Proto-Indo-European trehomnos, which only exists because throw is a strong verb. Anyway, eti has to give ama. Are there any other options? Well, yes, kind of, but these yield some difficulties. Yeti to yana is the big one. With ya dropping, it still preserves the edi ending, but that forms weak verbs. Let's talk about stress patterns in Proto-Indo-European. So the big thing is that the main difference between eti and yeti isn't the consonant, but the stress. Now, stress is obviously really important because of a system called ablaut, where the stress, as defined by affixes, changes the quality of the vowel in the root. Now, since the aorist, or past tense, is completely different, this creates strong verbs that use a vowel shift to change tense. But that's not what we're talking about. We're focusing only on the present. The main thing is Werner's Law, which happens on the road to Proto-Germanic. After Grimm's Law, these both become ethi. And it's only because there's an unstressed vowel here that it voices back to edi. Only in the strong version, even ignoring the yod, the weak endings are completely different. So, edi has to be from eti, and it has to be strong. Skib is a lot simpler, but skip isn't a real root that exists, so we need to come up with something else, and we need Werner's Law to voice the D, so it can't also voice the B. However, we do have something very close, the Proto-Indo-European skap, with an A. This might strike you as weird. Back to ablaut, E is not the only vowel in Proto-Indo-European technically, but it should be the only one listed in the name of a root, and certainly shouldn't be possible. Let me elaborate on that. Within ablaut, e is sort of the default, and vowels change between varying degrees of e, o, and completely silent based on what the surrounding morphemes want them to do. It's usually hard to predict what ablaut will do. Most morphemes have their own rules, to the extent that there are general rules: E grade when stressed, 0 grade before the stress, O grade after the stress, though that's usually rare. O grade is mostly just imposed by morphemes. Is certainly not part of the ablaut system, even if it does exist. It usually emerged from e when adjacent to the consonant h, which is part of a group called the laryngeals, which exists to explain when vowels do weird things like this, and because they are sonorants, can become vowels if the vowels feel like taking a day off. So, how did we get scap? This gives English shave and Latin scabies, if you care to know. Well, There are probably two options. One, that it's just straight up a loanword from another language in the region, or some kind of Vandavot. It doesn't obey Proto-Indo-European rules because it's not a Proto-Indo-European word. Two, that it's an extension of some root to the effect of ske, which is then condensed into skap or skip, which devolves into skap by late Proto-Indo-European. All this to say, skap probably wouldn't ablaut normally, and it would give skabana and skabidi in Proto-Germanic. So, how do we get skibidi? We'll have to make up a new root in Proto-Indo-European, or rather, extend an existing root. So, what the heck is root extension in Proto-Indo-European? Short answer, it's when you make a root longer. Long answer, you add a consonant on the end of a root to make it longer. That's pretty much all we know. It probably was the result of some old derivational suffixes, but nowadays each letter is just a sound. If ten to stretch is extended to temp to tear apart, you can't really assign any meaning to p, and it probably won't have the same effect on geld to make cold. In fact, it doesn't really seem like extensions have any effect whatsoever, and gelp and gelt and gel would all pretty much mean the exact same thing. So, the root ske, which means to split, dissect, or cut something up, which can easily be extended into scape, means something like sever or cut something off. Skepeti then becomes skibidi, which has semantic drifted to be the Proto-Germanic word for he refines, simplifies. From here, the route to English is simpler, being Old English shiveth and English shives, past Early Modern English shiveth. And this is still a class 1 strong verb, so it has the past tense he shives, he shove, he has shiven. That was fun and very time-consuming. Let's do goon next. As referenced in the thumbnails, goon can be reconstructed in Old English as gonan. Now, because of the raising effects of the nasal, this could actually be from an earlier ganan, from Proto-Germanic genana, or from Proto-Germanic gonana. This doesn't really matter. The form of the root is the same regardless of the ablaut, gehen. And wouldn't you know, this doesn't exist either. We have deh and deh, but extending roots with a sonorant instead of a plosive is less common. Could we do a nasal infix? First off, what is a nasal infix? Well, verbs are wacky in Proto-Indo-European, and if you couldn't tell, there are a lot more ways of making a root into a verb than just eti and yeti, and even then, only some of them are used in all languages, some are non-verbal morphology that's used for verbs in Germanic, and then repeat for all the other language families. Like extensions, a lot of these seemingly carry no semantic function other than making it look cool, and one of them is just jamming an N into it for no reason. So could we do this to make goon? Well, no, because for one thing, this almost never happens in English, because the N only sticks around in the present tense, giving a glaring separation between the present and past tense. In Latin, knock yourself out, but English pretty much only has stand, stood, which is also strong because it forces its own laryngeal into 0 grade, so we wouldn't get the long vowel we need for goon. And fortunately, this isn't our only option, because we don't need the ed ending, we're not tied to the strong eti verb form, and so we can dive into the wealth of Proto-Germanic weak verb forms. Notably, class 4 weak nana, like mourn, and the still productive n suffix. This ending is heavily influenced by North Germanic, but we can roll with it. The full stem is jehnti, which in theory should be formed off of an adjective, using this yawn to letting hang open in surprise, and then surprised, and then this verb to surprise or stun. That gives Proto-Germanic gonana to overwhelm, and Old English gonan be overwhelmed by, and goon is to lose yourself. Decidedly not in the music the moment. In jorkin it. Next up is Chud, originally an acronym, is a perfect example of a short, one-syllable word that could actually exist in English. Now, Chud is actually a bad example of a short, one-syllable word that has difficulty existing in English. The ch sound is a palatalized form of k, which tends to only happen before a front vowel. Yes, there are words like choose, choke, and tangentially shoot, but those are long vowels for a good reason. The diphthong ew, which tends to emerge a lot from Proto-Indo-European ew, becomes Old English ew. For expected English e, compare read, flee, deep. So far, that happened to these words. For Chosian, Achokian, Shoten, what went wrong? Well, There were also sh and y, which don't need front vowels to be palatal. Well, one version of y from soft r needs a front vowel, but y from Proto-Germanic doesn't need it, and we don't have letters to spell them separately yet, so a front vowel was added, making jung spelt as jung, and the same convention was copied over onto other palatal consonants, so you end up not being able to tell the difference between Chosian and Chosian. And it must have also been a challenge to tell them apart while speaking, which no doubt influenced the spelling convention. And long story short, the palatal consonant can eat the front part of the diphthong, leaving only a back vowel. But this can't happen to Chud because the O diphthong is always long. Not that it wouldn't work, compare blood, but it wouldn't be spelt right. The short equivalent would need a semivowel or h. It could also be a back vowel in the next syllable, but even if it was broken in some form like Proto-Germanic kidus, chod, this diphthong always lowers into Old English chod and English chod. So, could we use a geminated ending consonant to shorten it? Well, no, because if this was always geminate since Proto-European, it would be broken down into s. Compare y's from widtos. Also, geminates always shorten after semivowels, and if it was lengthened in West Germanic, some form kaudio, chod, then it would be umlauted to Old English chud and certainly become ched. But speaking of umlaut, there is a way for it to be both u and a front vowel at the same time. So the vowel y arises from the umlaut of short u, and it becomes I in English, like in king and vixen and filth and hill. But sometimes it just doesn't, like in shut. So what we're getting at is Old English chuda, expecting Middle English chida, but getting chuda from some dialectical source for English chud, potentially spelt chode, but that's probably going to happen no matter what. That has to come from Proto-Germanic kudir, from a Proto-European root goat or goat with voicing by Werner's law. Alternatively, compare cum and cow, where a preceding w devours even a front vowel to become u. It could easily be from a Proto-Germanic quedig with a Proto-Indo-European root guet. I chose this root because it's the one that exists, meaning resin or gum. An unumlauted version of this actually exactly gives English cud. I'm just that good, by the way. I found this all out in that order. So, Is actually tends to force O grade and force a stressed root, so I is more active in this situation, giving Proto-Indo-European guet, meaning something to the effect of pine sap or resin. That gives Proto-Germanic quidi and Proto-West Germanic kuli, as it takes on more meaning of getting sap stuck to your fingers and so getting a bunch of gunk stuck to them. As we arrive in Old English chuda and Modern English chud, this word has become synonymous with sticky gunk that gets stuck to your hands and is so used as an insult for a sort of grimy, sticky person. Delightful, if I do say so myself. This is a much more fun video topic than I was expecting. Last word I've got time for is foid. Now, you may note that this has the oi diphthong, and so has to come from Latin. That's okay. We got this, probably. I actually know way less about French and Latin than English, but whatever. So the diphthong oi isn't technically natural in Old French. The modern French wa that emerges from Latin long e was much more fronted in Norman French, compare quatre with increase. So there are two ways oi actually shows up. One, palatalized consonants. So, for lack of a better understanding, in the journey from Latin to French, certain consonants eat a y sound in front of them and then later spit it out behind them. This mostly happens with L, compare oil spoil. The problem is that in these situations, the is usually subject to number 2 lenition. So in between two vowels, the consonants the, k, and g soften and break down basically into dust. And if those two vowels happen to be O and E, well, you do the math. That gives words like void with harder final consonants. So that gives two main avenues for foid to take, except it's actually just one, because when t and k try to do this pathway, they palatalize into t and z. Something like fotion would give foide like voice. More likely, we have a three-syllable word like fokitum, fogitum, or foditum, or actually, we should probably use a feminine version. Now, itus, ita is an adjective-forming suffix in Latin, but whatever, words do strange things. Fokitum is derived from focus, fireplace, cognate with Spanish fuego, and means something like relating to a fireplace or hearth. I'm going to make it a deonym for Hestia or Vesta in Latin, and so for all those connotations about feminine domestic life. That becomes Proto-Romance Fokita, Lenites first into Fogita and Foida, for Old French Foid, loaned as English Foid, a derogatory term for women implying they should be domestic and all vestal and stuff. Modern French Foid. This was fun. Maybe I'll do it again if I have some good examples of slang terms to do faux etymology on. All right. Daddy wasn't there. Peace.